So fundamentally, what is this character doing for damage and defense? Well, simply put, we are scaling a lot of intelligence and a lot of power charges. We are equipping a Relic Ashes and Patience so that we always have the maximum number of power charges up effectively on our character at all daylight hours. We are using Power Siphon to leverage those power charges for cap crit and a crap ton of extra crit multi, as well as the just generic damage scaling vector that is crit, giving us very easy access into scaling crit as a source of damage. We're scaling attributes to scale damage with a wand that looks a little something like this. We're using intelligence as a damage vector with a wand like this to scale our flat lightning and our spell damage, which we're converting to a 100 for 50% increased damage multiplier with a helmet that looks like this, a Crown of the Eyes. Specifically needs to be Crown of the Eyes. I shouldn't say a helmet that looks like this. It needs to be Crown of the Eyes. And we're also getting a corruption for the +1 maximum power charge implicit on that Crown of Eyes so that we can dip into our power charge scaling as well as our intelligence scaling, right? We're getting a crap ton of spell damage with our intelligence. We're equipping a Crown of the Eyes. We're getting a +1 power charge on that. We're scaling power charges into the moon for access for exponential damage scaling. We're scaling intelligence for exponential damage scaling. That's kind of how it comes together. We're also equipping a Malachai's Loop. This is one other way that it comes together. We get the +2 max power chargers, which is really key with Relic Ashes and Patience. That those are up all the time. We don't need to worry about the lose all power charges upon reaching max. And then we're also very, very heavily leveraging the 13% increased spell damage per power charge, right? That's per power charge. It adds a new vector of scaling to it. So normally for power charges, you just get the crit strike multi, or sorry, the critical strike chance. These points are kind of busted, especially these ones. These ones give you 8% increased critical strike chance per power charge and 5% critical strike multi per power charge. We can make those effects active permanently and at their maximum efficacy by simply equipping these boots. These are incredibly overpowered, will probably be nerfed by the end of this league, even further than it's already been nerfed, the Relic Ashes and Patience boots. So we're equipping these boots, we're equipping this shield, we're equipping this helmet. I would say that is the core identity of the build. And when you're on a low budget, you can equip these pieces with this wand right here, which you can find for 5 chaos, and this unique right here, Badge of the Brotherhood. Graven Secret with a good corrupted implicit is also a fantastic replacement for Mageblade. Allocating overcharge is something you will want to do because when you first start this build, you probably will not want a tree that looks like this. And the reason for that is because when you first start this build, you probably won't be doing a lot of intelligence stacking. And help you guys understand what I mean by that better, I think it's best if I just show you a version of this character that does not leverage the int stacking. With this character, boom, we have Pyroclasmic Pro. This guy is using only uniques, and you may notice, but none of these are particularly expensive to assemble. I'd say the most expensive pieces that he has are his Replicas Hyrie Ire that he seems to have maybe divined up before corrupting for 30%. He may have divined it up for max or near max evasion roll. Because Hyrie Ire, by the way, just a quick side note about this piece, it's an incredibly powerful piece. It's just like generically super strong for the build. It doesn't do anything in particular like special. It just does everything that the build wants really well. It comes with a really nice added lightning damage with wand attacks that we absolutely make use of. It's basically like half a support gem's worth of value, maybe like 3/4. So that's super valuable. You get like a pseudo 7 link. Comes with a crap ton of evasion that we of course scale as Trickster with Escape Artist. That being said, you will eventually want to replace this with a Sadist's Garb. One big reason that it can actually roll more evasion and energy shield on a Sadist's Garb if we go for tier 1 rolls. But that's aside the point. It comes with a lot of evasion. It comes with a intelligence roll, which of course we make use of later on. You won't use the intelligence roll too much at the beginning of the build when you start out because you'll be doing something like this, but you will be using that intelligence roll later on when you make a transfer over to the int stacking version of the build, although by that point you will eventually want to be transitioning into a status garb. And then of course it comes with a juicy 30% suppress roll, which beats out any rare roll that you can get, which is one of the unfortunate things about switching over to a rare chest piece, is you have a lot of suppress that you have to make up. So Replica's High Reire, I think it sells for, well, I could just check the price on mine right now to kind of get a rough idea. 4 or 5 divines. You can see he's using the Taming and a Chaperon's Revelation on the left ring slot. I absolutely recommend that. Helps with mana a little bit, although you don't have that many problems with mana because you're going to be leeching because you are an attack build. So we can just get Clever Thief to pretty much solve your mana issues while on maps. But Chaperon's Revelation makes mapping when you are not hitting something. So when you're going to and from packs, Flame Dash and Shield Charge, it makes it more comfortable. Also, of course, being a CI build, we do make use of Taste of Hate. We don't use a live flask. I like to, and I did this only when I got my Mage Blood, but you can do this even beforehand. Put a lot of your resistances on your flasks, and then just, you know, use the used when charges reach full suffix to try to keep them up permanently. This becomes especially easy if you get a precision Watcher's Eye that gives you % chance to gain a flask charge when you critically strike. You're always critically striking, so you have no problems meeting that. This guy's using an accuracy mastery. I would not be surprised if he is doing something with his build with a Lethal Pride to change that. No, he's not, because Lethal Pride can't change mods. I wouldn't really recommend that. You shouldn't need, although actually before you make the swap, accuracy is going to be a little bit more difficult to come by. You're going to have to level your precision because you can't really make use of your intelligence in a meaningful way to scale your accuracy yet. You see this guy only has 310 intelligence. Well, I have 1230, so this guy can't use his intelligence in the same way that my build can to push his damage, or well, to push his accuracy, which pushes his damage. So I guess that's just something that's important to note. But you'll still want to assemble a character like this. Notice he's using the Badge of the Brotherhood. That's really important. He's getting to use all of his max power charges stacked worth in frenzy charges. That's not something my build can do because I'm not using the Badge of I'm not using the Badge of the Brotherhood. You will eventually prefer a attribute stacking necklace or amulet, which will maybe in the initial stages of your transition over to the int stack swap, the int and power charge stack swap, that might initially look like you using an Eyes of the Great Wolf. Eventually you'll want to swap over to somebody who's doing the big dams. Let's check out the big dams. How about Duce? Mr. Duce, he's using a simplex amulet with % increased attributes and % increased intelligence and % increased damage per 15 intelligence. This is something, this is basically what you'd want endgame. Of course, this is incredibly expensive to craft. It's a simplex base, so, and he has to smush 2 awakened affixes together. Really annoying. Really annoying to craft. I have not crafted one of these myself yet, and you basically have to craft one of these because there's none of these selling on trade, or there's like one of them selling for 100 divines or like 2 mirrors, or I don't know. The price on these is incredible. Basically, good luck. But yeah, this is something that you need late game to really push the damage beyond the threshold that I'm stuck at right now, which is the very womp for 15 mil. I wish 15 mil. We're currently looking at the Tron Bike passive tree, where we have, of course, the Perandus pack with increased energy shield slotted in. That's not configured on my character. It's not configured on my character, and when I try to put in increased max ES, it of course does not scale my character correctly because it is base ES. It is not % increased max ES, which is how Transfiguration of Soul would scale it. So my damage is actually higher than this. If you get what I'm talking about, it shouldn't be too hard to explain. I think I just did a pretty good job of explaining it, but I'll do it again just one more time, just in case it wasn't clear enough. This Perandus Pact, which is slotted in, I can't unclick it. No, I can unclick it, because if I equip this node, I unclick this, you see my energy shield does not change, even though well, I guess it changes like it changes by like 40, but this is giving me way more than just 40 energy shield, and I can demonstrate that by all I'm going to do, right? I'm just going to unequip this, and I go down by whopping like 800, 900 energy shield. So that's giving me percent increased ES. As you can see, if I hover over it, it says passive skills and radius also grant percent increased energy shield. And if you look at Transfiguration of Soul, increases and reductions to max energy shield also apply to spell damage at 30% of their value. And as we already discussed, our helmet says increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attacks at 150% of their value. So it's not accounting the percent increases for all of these passive points that I'm taking, right? 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%, blah, 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 blah. Masteries don't count because they're not passive points, but all of these small passives are giving me 3% increased spell damage that are not being accounted for in my passive tree. I think my character, all in all, when I've got my lightning exposure applied to the enemies via my lightning penetration gem that has a 10% chance to apply it, when I'm hitting them and I have my max shock value applied to them, which I can usually average out even on endgame bosses at about 30 to 40%. Not Ubers, I haven't tried Ubers, I haven't tried tier 15 or tier 17s, but endgame pinnacle bosses you see in the clips before you were 42% regular. When I've got my intimidation applied via my Karui Timeless Jewel, my Lethal Pride, giving me a 10% chance to intimidate right here, giving us a 10% more damage multiplier because we are an attack. We are doing attack-based damage. When we, this is where it gets a little PoB warrior-y, I will admit, but when we're standing on our Sigil of Power, right, giving us a crap ton of extra damage, not really a crap ton, but I'm going to be fair to my build and say we are getting about 30% more damage, and that's basically it. You know, not actually too PoB warrior-y, if I'm being fair. I guess when our energy shield is maxed out, but to be fair to my build, I am a trickster, I have overleech, I am usually maxed out on energy shield, so, and even that isn't that insane a DPS boost. It's about a mil. So yeah, optimal conditions for my character. I have great clear, I would say great clear DPS, and you could say this isn't actually your clear DPS. Oh, this isn't your clear DPS because these percent chances, chance to intimidate and expose, these percent chances are low, so you shouldn't count them for clear because your average hit isn't going to be this. Okay, fair enough. Well, maybe I'm at 12 mil. Either way, really, my clear DPS is always fuckety, as I say, because we have what's known as lightning damage fuckety. Lightning damage fuckety is whenever you're doing lightning damage in Path of Exile and you don't have an amulet like yeah, this bad boy right here, Voice of the Storm, lightning damage with non-crits is lucky. Unless you have something like this to make your lightning damage roll twice, it's never really going to feel good for clear, because lightning damage, the sad truth the matter, sad fact reality with lightning damage is it has a really low base floor, and you make that even lower with volatility. It's all worth it in the end. Your damage overall is pretty good. I'm not going to say insane, but hitting 12 to 13 mil with a build that doesn't scale projectiles in a exponential way, in a way where we're like using Nimbus to get like backshot, shotgun projectile multi hittings, if that sentence made sense, I promise you. You know, in a build where we are just hitting things in a very one-dimensional way, we're just throwing something out and hitting them. I've been very impressed with how this build has performed. It's insanely tanky. I haven't even really gone over the defensive layers. Of course, we're using a Mage Blood, which, you know, okay, we're using a Mage Blood, so we're tanky because we're using a Mage Blood, but we're also hitting evasion cap against enemies. You can't really see that reflected all that well. And my tooltip, you look at it, it's 88%, and that's cool, but we are of course using Dread Banner and a passive point on the tree versus rares called Mark the Prey, which gives us an extra 10% multiplier to effectively get very close to evade cap. We're at 92%. I was, previous to this iteration of the build, using a Watcher's Eye that looked like this to get very close to suppress cap, and I was using a Quartz Flask to basically get suppress cap. So yeah, I was using this bad boy to get basically suppress cap and evade cap, but I was like, I don't like the damage on this bad boy. I need to up the damage numbers. Got to get the PoB ready for the build showcase, the build preview for you guys, of course. So I said, screw this, and then I went and bought one of these bad boys right here for, let's check the divs. I don't think it was too expensive. It was these two rules. No, actually, I think this was extremely expensive. This was like 70 divines. Okay, yeah, this was like 70 divines, the double damage. And this rule does not increase the cost whatsoever, but a double damage Watcher's Eye like this, effectively giving me somewhere in the ballpark of like 10 to 15% more damage, or not 10 to 15, probably closer to like, because, you know, the pen roll 15%, you can kind of read that as 15% more, 43% lightning damage. Well, it's not spell damage roll, but still 43% increase is still pretty good. This is somewhere in the ballpark of, yeah, I'd say like 16, 17, 18% increase more damage. So pretty nutty jewel, and definitely one that will increase the costs of the build substantially. You know, it's a build I've been playing for a week. I'm going to make investments into it. So similarly, I've got, like I showed you guys earlier, the +1 max power charges ring. Now this bad boy, I would not expect for you guys at home, but it is something that you'd need, unfortunately, to really push the build to its limits. And then I just realized, okay, I'm on display capture. So yeah, you saw the price on that. You just, of course, dupe it, so you only have to craft one of them. But when you get something like this, you get the Calander's Touch, and then you know, we can really leverage our gear with gear pieces. Basically, the soul of the build is that we're stacking power charges and intelligence, and so it really is necessary to get cure pieces like this, where you're able to very efficiently pick up a lot of intelligence and an actual power charge in one. And then really it's in two, because we can just dupe it very efficiently. So it's a sad fact of reality. This is one of those builds that it's a project build, but it's a project build that you don't even really get that much returns from. You know, there's, like I showed you the build earlier, Splitting Steel Champion. This is a build that you could invest hundreds and hundreds of divines in and see, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of DPS come back from, because you're using Splitting Steel that has an interaction with Nimbus to just shotgun and fire projectiles everywhere, and have those projectiles hit the enemy as they explode. They can shotgun the enemy and hit them multiple times. And so whereas the tooltip may say 11 mil, this is actually hundreds of millions of DPS. Our build really is just the very pitiful, you know, 12 million DPS without our exposes, our lightning expose and intimidate, and that's solely because we're just sitting here doing this. We're just sitting here doing this to enemies. You know, if there's an enemy in front of me, as I've shown you guys throughout gameplay footage of this character already, I'm just sitting here, I'm shooting one projectile out, it's just going out, it's hitting them, it's not returning back, it's not exploding at the target, it's just going out, it's hitting the enemy, it's piercing them, and it's going to go hit another enemy maybe. And that's really all the build's doing, as insofar as a damage delivery system is concerned. And the sad fact of Path of Exile these days is that isn't enough, right? That's just not efficient enough. You can't scale your damage that weanily, right? You need more. You need more to take to just really push the PoB numbers, to really push Path of Exile. You gotta get more than just that. We do get very efficiently survivable, though, I will say that, and this is where I'm gonna go over the defenses. So again, with Mage Blood, and with CI, and with Trickster, we very efficiently hit a pretty massive ES pool. This is, of course, using this league's forbidden power or borrowed power of Brandis Pact. You're going to have something like this every league to abuse, so abuse it. We are also using tattoos in case these don't core, but don't go core, but I'm pretty sure they will. We're converting our dexterity into suppress, and our strength into work rate cooldown recovery rate. And that's what we're doing with those stats. And we're able to do that efficiently because we rolled a single piece of gear with strength and dex. We duped it. We have the Eyes of the Great Wolf. It's going to be hard to transition off this gear piece, because even though I know a better necklace is available with a juicy Omega crafted necklace like what we saw earlier on that character that I don't have his character sheet pulled up anymore, that has like 46% increased intelligence, it's going to have less other attributes than the Eyes of the Great Wolf. So transitioning out of that's going to be more difficult. Yeah, that's going to make it more difficult to do things like this. It will also make it easier to transition off of Replica's Hyri Zyre, because this just has such a high dex requirement. I think a Sadist Garb is somewhere in the ballpark of like a 160. And actually, yeah, Replica's Hyri Zyre Replica High Resire is the gear piece that's pushing my dex requirement for this build up so high. It's just the item. As you see, other items that are increasing, when a gem increases the attribute requirement of an item, it will, next to the item's attribute requirement, say gem. And as you can see with Replica High Resire, this item requires 197 dex, but that's only because of the chest piece itself. So transitioning off of this item will bring the dexterity requirements down of the build quite significantly. I think it's by like 30 or something like that, because none of my, Grace is 155, and mark on hit is 111, sniper's mark is 155. Yeah, so it will take off some dex tax, if you will. But yeah, I have some upgrades still to making this character, but that's like mere tier shit or close to it. You know, upgrades that I don't necessarily want to make. And again, something that you're going to start off with is really, it's going to look something like this. It's going to look like 10 to 15 divines at most, right? Assembling this character right here is 15 divs, maybe. And that's really just accounting for, that's trying to say, like, I don't know the price of a Watcher's Eye with just a single damage mod. I doubt it's very pricey. You're going to assemble something like this. It's not going to be nearly as tanky as a character like mine, but it's still going to have a fair, effective health pool, and you're going to be clearing tier 16s relatively efficiently. And then you'll have the ability to upgrade up to a character that does at least 8 million DPS. Again, if you can't get a ring that looks like this and dupe it, it's going to be hard to calculate my DPS if I literally just take it off, but actually maybe it won't, because if I literally take off my ring, and I'm actually taking off 2 rings right now, right, because my other ring is only reflecting my first ring. So if I unequip both my character's rings, I still have 8 million DPS, and that's with attribute requirement difficulties not probably taking into effect, so it's just taking off the int that my rings are giving me and the power charges. So yeah, my character is not actually that cracked if you take off these rings. Like, if you take off these rings, then I have this crafted wand that you can craft for under 15 divines. I made a video on that, so go watch that video if you want to find out how you can craft a wand very similar to mine for under 15 divines. It costs 40 divines on trade. You can craft it for 12 divines. It's very inexpensive, in my opinion. And then, of course, you've got Malachi's Loop that you just buy on trade for like 5C if you want to get a Corrupted Implicit. And you should get a Corrupted Implicit for Fizz taken as Chaos, because that's a nutty Corrupted Implicit for this build. That's basically just free Fizz mitigation. This will cost you a few divines, but still relatively cheap. It's going to be within the 15 divine budget. A Crown of the Eyes with a +1 max power charge implicit. I'm not going to lie to you and say that this is 5C, because it's actually probably still, yeah, it's like 10 divine. So that's going to be one of the most expensive uniques, or probably the most expensive uniques. Unique is just getting a +1 max power charge Crown of Eyes. To assemble this build, I'd say I would say that's mandatory, but that's very, very it's key. Okay, it's key that we get that +1 power charge on the Crown of the Eyes. Like I said that earlier, that's where the build kind of comes together, right? Is where we get that +1 power charge, which feeds into our power charge stacking, and then the increases and reductions to spell damage also applying to attacks, which feeds into our int stacking. That's what comes into effect later. Before you start really efficiently stacking intelligence, you're still going to want a Crown of the Eyes, because Crown of the Eyes stacks your spell damage with your power charges, which you are, of course, doing, you know, from the very core concept of the build with Malachi's Loop, right? You're stacking power charges, you're getting a Crown of the Eyes to convert the spell damage that you're stacking into increased damage at a 150% ratio, and you're keeping those power charges up permanently via Relic Ashes and Patience. And you, when you're doing this, will use a very cheap Badge of the Brotherhood, relatively cheap Badge of the Brotherhood, to keep up 10 frenzy charges, and that will be your cheap way of getting a crap ton of extra damage. And feels good stats, right? Frenzy charges, especially with Mistwalker, as I recommended earlier, increase your survivability, your overall feels good ability, because elusive effect also increases your move speed in addition to giving you damage avoidance, and then it just gives you a crap ton of generic more damage scaling, right? Elusive charges give you or sorry, not elusive charges, frenzy charges give you more damage, and when you have 10 of them, you get 40% more damage. So that's how we're doing the build. Now, power charges has a couple of benefits to it. Of course, one of them I think goes without saying, which is that it just kind of comes with a lot of built-in quality of life. With a little more than a little bit of passive pure scaling on the tree or an Eyes of the Great Wolf, you can clear entire screens like this. You get to dedicate 5 gems towards damage scaling, which feels great. As I mentioned, it comes with a bunch of built-in scaling with power charges. It does feel good. With only the core pieces to the build, we basically get crit capped, which also feels very good. Yeah, you get your crit strike multi-scaling coming from power charges, which means you never feel bad about scaling power charges even past to, the point where you are crit capped. That feels good. It means that power charges stay relevant as a source of scaling, which means that this build truly is a power charge and int stacking wanter. We're not just one, we truly are stacking both, and we're stacking both as much as we can. As you can see, we have 11, as I said, we have 1200 int. That's not a small amount of either, you know. We did quite a lot of tricks to get this many. Yeah, the character does have a lot of satisfying elements with regards to its playstyle and its overall mapping feel. We're super tanky, you know. Don't let me sleep on this. Our max hit with all of our buffs up, which they are up quite frequently, by the way. But as you can see, the uptime on Immortal Call, and yeah, you can just see it for my character. I'm not trying to exaggerate it. Immortal Call, Enduring Cry, you can see they kind of rotate on my character pretty regularly. This is as a result of me having some tattoos of the Tukohama Warcaller for Enduring Cry, and all of the quality scaling that I'm doing with my gems, of course, to get increased duration and efficacy does not actually matter for gem quality for skill effect duration, but we have automation on the Immortal Call. Immortal Call is 23%, automation is 20% in level 21, so we're getting a little bit of increased cooldown recovery effect. It doesn't really matter too much on the specifics. All you need to know is that our buffs, which are up quite often, lead our character to effectively being 140,000 hit point pool. We are of course CI, so we don't worry at all about chaos damage. This is with a pretty hefty fizz max hit, but again, to be fair, this is with Immortal Call. I'm going to now untick Immortal Call because I think a lot of people would consider that to be a more realistic understanding of how tanky your character is. We do that, we're at 65k. Now let's untick Enduring Cry. I think this is kind of unfair. My character usually has this buff up. It's not 100%. I will say that though too. So to be fair, absolutely fair to my character, the 100%, like, what is your character at 100%, you know, uptime? Well, to be fair, at 100% uptime, we don't even actually have our Vessel of Victor up, which means we're actually quite squishy to lightning damage. But with Vessel of Victor up, we are at 80, 84, 84 CI, like I said, 62k max hit, relatively tanky. We feel very good, especially during maps. Is the main thing. This character is primarily meant to be a tanky map blaster, and I think I achieved that thoroughly with this config that I'm running with my character. As you can see, this is the, I guess you'd say, the end game tree where I stretch over. I get as many, I don't want to say as many, it's not like I'm going out of my way to get int nodes, but I'm sparing no expense, right, to stay on the top half of the tree, to make sure that most of my travel nodes are int nodes, to make sure that I do go all the way over here for that extra power charge. I don't anoint it or anything along that, you know, I'm not anointing overcharge. I'm going to stretch all the way over here. I'm going to get overcharge. I'm going to be grabbing sovereignty and influence, sovereignty and influence. We're going to be getting our cluster jewels. I actually only got one of them so far. I could fit in another one if I reconfigured. If I would really, it would require a super nutty, like, well-crafted cluster jewel, but I could fit another one in if I was about that. Wait, hold up, we gotta zoom in. This is super important. Right here, we put 2 split personality jewels with intelligence and energy shield. Look at the way that we path and copy it for maximum efficiency. It would hit into polymath a little bit, and I would feel a little bit bad about that, but I could make that transition. And so yeah, this is the, again, the idealized, like, the end game goal of the character was to be and is to exist as what I've created here, which is to be a tanky map blaster. We achieve about 11 million DPS just walking around pushing the T button, pushing my main skill button, which is just regular old power siphon. When we push Val power siphon, since it fires out 2 projectiles, we can enable Val power siphon here, and we can turn off Power Siphon, so we just get a good read of out Power Siphon. We have 3 uses of it, so I'd say we can hold it for probably about a second. So a DPS of Val Power Siphon is about 31 mil, but just pushing the button once creates 2 projectiles. It creates on average, I guess, 31 mil. But when you're just walking around clearing, for the most part, you're going to be dealing 12 mil DPS, which I think, you know, with this config, I should say, which I think is quite respectable, all things considered, with what we've created here. So yeah, that's what we got. I guess I should go over the gems and the ores and whatnot. What are the gem links? What is the flexibility? Because I know one of the biggest complaints the players are going to have if they try to replicate this build is they're going to roll up with a Hyri's Ire or Replica's Hyri Ire. They're going to notice, hey, this is a dexterity base, and you're telling me I got to roll 6 off colors? That's no fun. And you're right, it is no fun we have here, because none of the green gems are very beneficial. You can try slower proj, and I did for a little while. There is a damage bonus conferred to slower proj, but it's like half a gem link's worth more damage. It's like 10%, and I think it scales up to like 20%, so it's really not that much. It's not that worth it. You could replace that, like I said, with damage on full life if you want a little bit more conditional damage. You could also swap out the Awakened Lightning Penetration support gem for wall damage on full life or added lightning damage. You scale a lot of flat naturally with this build by virtue of all of the flat we're getting from our intelligence. When you eventually craft your wand and get a crap ton of intelligence, you're going to get a crap ton of flat lightning. And so flat lightning isn't nearly as valuable on our build. It's not like a 10% more damage build every time we get a bit of flat lightning damage, like it is for some other spellcaster, especially builds. But it's still valuable, and flat lightning damage is, you know, it's a gem link that will probably equate to about a 20 to 30% more damage multi for this build. And if you want to slot that in place of Awakened Lightning penetration, you can. What you would just do is you would be playing a significantly more inconsistent version of the build, where when you're pathing over here, you take the hits, have 25% chance to treat monster elemental resistances as inverted. And that's basically how you'll play this build. You might even consider not specking Prism Weave. You'll give up all penetration. You'll definitely forego like these 2 nodes. You'll give up all penetration on the build. And yeah, like I said, you'll give up lightning penetration for sure. I don't like it because you still like I mean, you can get out of lightning exposure. You get lightning exposure for free though, or for free from Awakened Lightning penetration. And penetration is just like, it's another vector of scaling more multi for this build that, yeah, sure, you could argue is completely wasted if you just wanted to get 1 passive point worth of a mastery that you'll get anyways, because you want to get masteries on polymath, on Trickster, because you're polymath. You know, you just get this 1 mastery, you make your damage basically become 25% of the time I do real damage. So it's like another version of crit, which is another reason why I don't like it. Some people argue like you don't really need the 25% chance to proc on trash mobs, because trash mobs, they only require about a 1/4 to a 1/10 of the damage as a unique monster does to kill. But the fact of the matter is this: the build already has inconsistent damage by virtue of the fact that most of your damage is lightning, and lightning has, you know, inherent to lightning damage, you have just a wide damage range. Our damage range is from 4,700 to 199,000 lightning damage, right? Of course, we have a lot of multipliers on top of that. I'm just trying to illustrate the point that lightning has a very wide damage range. And so your damage is kind of always going to be inconsistent to a degree. Making it even more inconsistent is not very much something that I want to screw around with. You can find yourself in a situation where even just your general clear on like white mobs, basically I don't like being in a situation where I have to push my main attack button several times just to clear trash mobs. I don't like that. That feels trash to me. I always want to be able to at least kill things with one click, right? Click once, kill everything. Click once, kill everything. Oh, it's a rare mob. Okay, maybe click a few times. Maybe push Q, right? Drop my sigil. Click a few times, it's dead. Okay, keep going. You know, I want to zoomy. The whole point of this build is to be zoomy and tanky, and obviously dish out some pretty good damage. We shouldn't, you know, I didn't prefer a playstyle where I was just like having to click 3, 4, 5 times just to kill something. So yeah, that's why I didn't go for the inversion mastery and forgo pen. So that's the explanation on the gem links, I think. Yeah, so obviously Val Power Siphon, you want to get a 21. It's not super critical because again, we get a lot of flat by virtue of just scaling int and power charges. So the main thing is to make sure you get a Val version, because Val power, like the Val version of Power Siphon is a really good ability. It's basically double the damage of regular Power Siphon because it fires 2 projectiles. So and it just feels better too. It just kind of like whips out quicker. 2120 Val Power Siphon. Energy Leech, in my opinion, is premium. I mean, you're going Leech, you're a Trickster. I go for Ghost Reaver. You know, why not go Energy Leech support? You're getting Soul Drinker. You're getting Ghost Reaver. It does add a conditional element to the build's damage where 14% more multi is dependent on you being on full energy shield, but I think that's totally fine personally. It's 38% more multi when you can meet its conditions, and you are definitely always leeching energy shield by virtue of the fact that you're Trickster, as long as you can leech energy shield from the enemy. Just with the fact, by virtue of the fact that we're always able to trigger the leeching condition, I think it just becomes worth it immediately just as a damage multiplier, because we're always able to at least consistently able to keep up the 24% more. Not to say that 24% more multi gem is good, but we can pretty regularly keep up the while on full, which does make it a 38% more multi, which is good. And then especially a 38% more multi plus it gets 1.9% damage leech. I mean, that's just great. That's perfect. That's basically doubling the ascendancy. You know, that's doubling the it's doubling the efficacy of our leech from our ascendancy at 1.9%. And then I could, you know, corrupt it for, I think, an additional percent. I want to say double, or an additional 0.1%. I've got the leech gem pulled up right here, actually. No, but I could corrupt it for 1% more multi, actually 2% more multi. So hey, that's a pretty dope corruption as is. So yeah, energy leech, dope gem, volatility. We are a lightning damage build, so that less minimum attack damage is kind of just not really a thing. Our base damage is just like if I click this off, it does scale our base damage down quite significantly, but the overall damage boost that this adds to our links is quite significant. I'll just put it this way. When I check PoB, it's like the 3rd highest gem link recommendation for scaling our damage. It's absurd. It's like 35 to 40% more damage. Power charge on crit, this one's a no-brainer. We right now have 11% power charges, and this is more damage, right? This is supported skills deal more damage, not more spell damage, it's more damage. So it's a complete no-brainer. It's 44% more damage, just an insane amount of damage. I think it's our highest more damage link, perhaps besides volatility. We have Awakened Lightning Penetration. This one's pretty insane when you consider that it's giving us exposure. Then we have Awakened Elemental Damage with attacks. This is a pretty nutty one insofar as it enables us to do Elemental Reflect maps with no problemo. It allows us to spec this exposure you inflict applies at least 18% to the affected resistance, and I get a spec off reduced elemental damage taken. So I get to forego that. I get to respec my Pantheon. It makes maps smoother to clear. It's also just a pretty damn nutty gem, and so far as damage link goes, it's 39% more damage, right? That's pretty damn good. So gem links overall, I'd say I'd give them like an A to an A plus. We get pretty darn good damage scaling off of our links. I gotta say this build takes pretty good advantage of gem link damage scaling. A plus that. The rest of the gear I wanted to go over, like I said, we get 11 power charges. Well, that's coming from our helmet. I'd say Crown of Eyes with the mandatory corruption of max power charges. Otherwise, yeah, you'd be going the like craft a warlord helmet route. It's kind of bad because Crown of Eyes is actually a good helmet for this build for sure. We make use of all of those stats pretty well. The reason why Crown of Ice is good for this build is the increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attacks at 150% of their value. Now, it is important to note, because there are variants of this build, there are other ways you could play this character, that stat can be in a similar fashion found on the Wand Mastery, and there are other ways to get it as well. However, Crown of Eyes provides the most premium conversion rate for it because it gives you that conversion of spell damage now applying to like increases and reductions to your spell damage now applies to your attacks in the vein where it's like if you have something that says, say for instance, like this cluster jewel says 13% increased spell damage. Well, that basically says a 13% increased attack damage. However, actually, instead of it saying 13% increased attack damage as it would with this Wand Mastery, it actually says something closer to like 18% increased damage, 18 to like 20% increased attack damage, by virtue of the conversion for the Crown of Eyes, which gives us 150% scaling. So it's absolutely nutty. It makes spell damage an absolute premium vector for scaling our damage because it makes it one of the premium stats, right? We have crit multi, that's a great stat. We have spell damage, that's a great stat. But you have those two ways of scaling your pools, right? Crit multi is your primary way of scaling your one big more multi pool, and we get that by way of, but you get crit multi from scaling power charges, and you get spell damage by scaling intelligence. So that's why both of these stats are great stats because they feed into our main damage engines. So you stack power charges, stack a lot of power charges, you get a lot of crit multi. We really want crit multi because we're completely crit capped, which means that all of our crit multi is basically just a big pool of more damage. Just multiplies our damage by that amount. And then we get a lot of intelligence, which gives us a lot of spell damage, which it multiplies our main damage pool by that amount. And then also intelligence gives us a lot of flat damage, which we use to scale all of our damage together. So those are the big three pools that we're scaling, and that's how we're scaling them. And those are the uniques that we're using to scale them primarily. I guess I'm missing two others. I briefly went over Replica Hyri's Ire. I'll mention that Replica Hyri's Ire comes with a really juicy lightning damage with a wand attacks roll. Basically, it's like a pseudo link. It's like a half a gem link's worth of damage. It's really nice. It comes with an intelligence roll, and it comes with a really juicy 30% chance to suppress spell damage roll on it. Absolutely premium chest with a 3200 evasion possibility if you corrupt it for 30%, and Sacred Orbit up. Absolutely premium chest. It's really hard to replace this. You can though with a Sadist Garb, and you absolutely should look to do that later on. You can get a lot more ES off a Sadist Garb, which does eventually scale your damage, and you can get an attributes roll on a Sadist Garb. It does eventually beat out the Hyri's Ire, but this is an absolutely premium chest, and I can't stress that enough. You should absolutely try to use this chest piece if you're trying to transition into this build. Then Eyes of the Great Wolf needs no explanation. Just an insane necklace for, or should I say an amulet for scaling attributes, and the Projectiles Pierce mod makes the build really come together as a super feels good map blaster. Now, it is easy to get around getting that mod, or that like Pierce does not need to be found on your amulet. I'm just going to say it that way. You do not need Eyes of the Great Wolf. And indeed, it's not even BIS. I wouldn't even say that this is BIS. This is absolutely not BIS. BIS is a simplex amulet from Heist, an amulet that lets you get super juiced suffixes. You get that, you roll percent attributes, you roll percent intelligence, you roll damage per intelligence, and that's your BIS amulet. And it's like, you know, a mirror or like 2 mirrors, but it's absolutely juiced. It's cracked. It's I think it actually has an influence on it. I think it was like Shaper influence or something like that. So it's definitely a rare item, but it's absolutely cracked. And it's kind of hard to fit in the build because you lose a bit of your percent attribute global scaling. You give it up for more percent int scaling, but it's absolutely worth it. Scales your damage to the moon. You see those, you'll see variants of this build. You'll see variants of this build that go to like 40, 50, and even 90 million DPS. And that's how they're doing that. They're getting, you know, they're getting their like 2 or 3 synth implicits on top of their +1 max power charge. They're getting their like 5% int and their +3% per power charge, or +3% increased spell damage per 100 intelligence synth implicits on their rings. They're getting their super cracked simplex amulets. That's how you're scaling this build to the moon. You're getting your super cracked Sadist Garb that scales, that has like the percent attributes roll on it in the suffix, as well as super crazy ton of energy shield to scale the damage, because, oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but we're taking Tranquility to give us Transfiguration of Soul to make sure that we have a reliable way of scaling damage with Energy Shield, because of course we are getting spell damage from Energy Shield. So even though it's only 30%, it's 30%, but then it gets scaled by 150%. So it's such a juicy, I like this multiplier. I wish this build was able to squeeze out more damage, because it really does feel like it's criminal how much money we invest in this build for how little return it feels like we get out of it. Fully configged out, fully PoB warriored out, where we hit 15 mil, and then if we want to fully PoB out, which is to say that we add Val Power Siphon, we add the +2 because we're hitting with Val Power Siphon, and hey, we have, you know, 3 instances of that, so you should hit it 6 times. Oh my god, we're doing 240, but this is not it. This is the same. You're not doing 200 million. You're not doing I'm sorry. You're not doing 200 million DPS. It's just not happening. This build is on the lower end of damage. I would say this build is lucky if it is hitting 20 million DPS. Like, you see this build right now and you see 15 million DPS. That is, honestly, that sounds kind of high. It is nice though, because again, Power Siphon has a lot of built-in quality of life. It has auto-targeting. It does have Culling Strike built into it. It does have built-in clear. It does have built-in like GMP, if you will, a GMP-like effect. You can play it with Trickster, so you get that built-in recovery, that insane amount of recovery. You get that built-in overleech, that Slayer-like effect. You get to get super tanky. I'm not going to say invincible, but super tanky when you get a Mage Blood and you take the max res to the moon. You get a big pool, especially when you craft a Sadist Garb, and with that big pool you can eventually move into like near immortality when you're scaling your resistances, your max resistances, because that huge pool, you know, it just you get that big pool, and then you get that max res up, and you get various sources of fizz mitigation or avoidance. You get your power charges from Ralakesh's, you get 4 of those. You get this bad boy right here, 10% of fizz gets taken as chaos, your CI, so that's literally just like 10% of fizz gets written off. You get another 10% of fizz gets mitigated completely when you're on full energy shield, and you're usually on full ES like we talked about. So you get a bunch of fizz mit, you get a big pool that you scale with bad boy right here, Escape Artist, and a Sadist Garb, and you end up with a pool of like 10k ES. And then with Mage Blood you get your resistances. I'm gonna pop Vinctors here. You get your max res to like 84 and 80, and then suddenly you have a pretty darn tanky character, especially when you pop a Mortal Call and you're looking at a, you know, quarter a mil effective HP pool. So it definitely does feel tanky. We've got decent suppress. We, again, like I said, your Trickster, you get to scale a big pool. When you scale a big pool, you scale your mitigation versus elemental very easily by just getting a big pool and scaling max res, because it's kind of the virtue of how resistances work in this game. When you scale like 90% maximum resistances and you get like, you know, 10k energy shield, well, you got to think about it. How big does the elemental hit have to be at that point to kill you? If you have 10,000 energy shield and you have 90% elemental resistances, you know, it has to be like 100,000 to kill you. You know, it's actually a pretty easy equation if you think about it from that perspective. But yeah, it's crazy. Your elemental max hit in this game it quickly scales to ludicrous levels when you just do two pretty simple things, which is scale your maximum elemental resistance and get more HP, get a bigger pool. And Trickster has a pretty easy time accomplishing that, is all I'm trying to say.